There is a challenge that is coming from digital currencies such as blockchain technologies.
So I think it's important to share that anything can be tokenized.
All the money.
I like the idea of a gold standard. I mean, it could be used in a very cryptocurrency way.
Very much sooner than a lot of people understand or think. We will be all at a level playing field.
Hey, welcome to the show. I have back one of my repeat guests. I think, Jake, you've been on more than possibly quite anyone else, maybe other than Jimmy. So welcome to the show. Jake Claver here from Digital Ascension Group. Jake, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Appreciate you having me back. Looking forward to the conversation around digital assets and utility and all the fun things that we've discussed before.
Awesome. So in case someone's watching and they haven't heard of you yet or haven't watched any of those shows, why don't you give us a little bit of background on you and what's your story?
Yeah. So made a good chunk of change in crypto in 20 and 21, started seeking out professional services for myself, and then figured out that I could, work with other people in that capacity, got on Twitter, started talking about mitigating taxes, setting up your estate, what that looks like. And so now we have a multifamily office, one of two in the US, that specialize in digital assets. It's Digital Ascension Group. Digital Family Office is the name of the family office. And we actually have again, one of two SEC registered RIAs underneath that manage clients' assets, provide qualified custody, borrow, lend, earn, all those things on your XRP. So when price appreciates, if you don't want to sell it, we've got ways to be able to mitigate taxes and structure your estate and make sure that you're set up. So
nice.
Yeah.
Well, in the past few months since we last spoke, a lot of things have changed. So we got a lot of things going on. So the most timely thing that I guess is kind of interesting for both of us is the Fruition Films Rigged from the Start / XRP Unleashed has now kind of been released in theaters, and tomorrow actually goes live online for people who want to download. So tell me a little bit about your experience in the film, like what stood out for you as memorable.
Yeah, so I didn't have as big a role as Jimmy. Or some of the other people. When they originally set out to film the documentary, I think they had intentions to maybe highlight XRP and the change in the financial system and curate, the transition of money. And they've said that they're going to do like a part 2 or another iteration of this over the next, 8-12 months here, where they're going to come out with another one that is centered around that. But they chose to kind of, I don't want to say pivot, but take the road of ETHgate in this first one. And really, I was really pleased with how they put the information forth. I didn't feel like it was accusatory. I think that they did a really good job of backing up all of the things that are stated in the film. They have actual, evidence of everything that was listed there. And so, I was just really proud of how they put it together. Excited for the community to be able to understand some of the more intricate things around that. Jimmy did a really good job of explaining that. You had Stephen Rayoff, others like yourself in the movie. And I think it'll just be good for the community to have something out. There's been multiple Bitcoin documentaries that have been listed on Netflix and a few other streaming services. And so to have this out there kind of as a representation of just some of the professionals in this community, I think will be great.
I had a similar experience. Most of the stuff I was interviewed on were more like macro, geopolitical, and economic topics, which Chris Dodge has said have been moved to this second film. My understanding is when they started, they didn't really know much about ETHgate, and so they were doing a more broad XRP / XRP Ledger just type of movie, like those ones generally about Bitcoin. But as they dug in deep, they found, like many of us found, that there's an interesting story here. Like, why are things not as they should be or as they appear? And that's kind of what led the ETHgate thing. So Jimmy originally, he was one of the first, kind of part of the first group of people I interviewed before they really uncovered ETHgate. So he went back out a second time and filmed a lot of his segments later on as they pivoted, as you said, towards this new focus. And it's timely, Stephen Rayoff wasn't even really on the scene when the initial filming was done. And so no one kind of knew about the bag of goodies that he was going to unleash on the world. So that was pretty exciting. It's also, in my opinion, people like DAI and Brad Kimes who have been covering this topic on their show for years and took a lot of heat and a lot of criticism for that. They were called conspiracy theorists, even by people in the industry like Charles Hodgkinson, right? So it's quite validating, I think, for them to see not only this film be made, but to have a lot of support from people publicly saying, you know what, this isn't a made up conspiracy theory. We have the receipts. We have, Jimmy had worked on this timeline years ago with kind of the whole Alibaba merger and MoneyGram and how all of that kind of fit into this. And no one would even really listen back then. They didn't want to hear it. So the fact that there's like a movie now about that to kind of memorialize it into the ether is pretty remarkable and pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'm excited. Like there's a lot. Obviously, Jimmy spent a lot of time going through and making those connections and doing the research, which I think this community, the XRP community in general, is like very good at. There are a lot of intelligent people that go and find and do the research on things and then present that well to other people. And Jimmy's definitely in that category. So excited for the validation that, like you said, Brad Kimes and DAI and a lot of other people in the community that have brought these, I don't want to say accusations, but information forth to just get some exposure for that. And hopefully we'll see what ends up coming of it. But yeah, excited to see it go live, tomorrow, like you said.
Yeah, pretty cool. And funny, when I first started working with Jimmy, I had talked about writing a book about ETHgate with him, and we were going to write it together. And as we sort of started planning that, we're like, people don't really read books as much as they watch videos. So we're like, we should make a movie about ETHgate, but we're like, but we don't really know how to do that. And we don't have the equipment. We're not very good video editors. That seems like a cool idea, but like, I don't think we have the ability to do that. And then all of a sudden, one day out of nowhere, this group materializes and fulfills the dream that we wanted to manifest.
Yeah. So before we got on, the reason, I kind of want to take the conversation around that. Maybe, do you think we'll get any speculative price rise off of this launch of the movie? I know that they've pivoted and called it rigged from the start instead of XRP Unleashed, but do you think there's going to be media that drives some speculation on the asset?
Well, the timing is pretty remarkable. So the day that the premiere I went to was in Atlanta, which was on a Thursday, and that was the day of like the first big price jump in a long time. So it was sort of like felt kind of magical that here I was going down to this theater to meet up with a bunch of XRP Army people, and everyone's excited because we've seen some, the price went close to $1 that day.
Yeah.
Now, in my opinion, I don't think the price of XRP should be correlated to media hype, whether that's the movie or even Trump's excitement about, or the sort of the excitement around Trump's pro-crypto stance, or even Gary Gensler leaving office. I mean, I've made videos and infographics and very publicly stated, I think the virtuous cycle is a driver of price. And if you're not familiar with that, imagine like a cyclone where you have two competing forces. One is the use of XRP as a way to exchange value, and two is store of value, using XRP as a place to kind of hold your wealth, like people do in gold or real estate or in US Treasuries for most of our lifetime. So when you have these two things competing with each other, it really creates this upward cyclone where the price action gets very high. So I still believe that we're waiting for mainstream utility adoption, and then the price goes up a little bit and people are like, well, the dollar's on its way out. We see massive inflation. Holding my wealth in dollars does not seem like a good long-term strategy. This XRP thing seems to be going up, so that seems to be a safer place to hold my wealth. When that conversation happens, and this morning or yesterday, a new thing came out with Ripple's 500 like ID numbers being issued to all these banks and businesses, kind of showing that, all right, we're ready for mainstream utility adoption. That to me will kick off the virtuous cycle, which would be an appropriate driver of price increase, not media hype.
Yeah, I would agree with you, but on the contingency, I think you need to be able to drive liquidity into the asset to get it to a point where it's usable for those transactions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they may use some media hype and FOMO and ETFs in order to pull, retail and institutional liquidity into the asset in order to get it to, say, $50 or $100 a piece, where they can start using it at scale to settle transactions. And then at that point, to your point, it'll just continue to compound on itself.
I just think retail is so tiny compared to institutional money that like we can't, the other thing about trading, and I don't mean to be cynical or paranoid, but I think it's kind of silly to trade in an environment where Aladdin participates, because Aladdin has so much money and access to all of the information and can process it in real time that to trade against Aladdin to me seems silly. So I think the price goes up, number one, when Aladdin is told to allow it to go up, and that then ushers in the gates for the real institutional money to come in.
Yeah, so we saw almost a little over a year ago, BlackRock filed their trust in Delaware for their iShares XRP ETF, which was later stated by Bloomberg to be a falsehood and a fugazi and swept under the rug. It's being investigated by the DOJ. I'm extremely confident that it would be very difficult for anybody to fake that and get through all of the notarizations and compliance that's required to file that trust. So
do people like do that as a joke? Like I don't hear about.
there has been one other instance that did occur. So for people that are on the other side of the fence, this has happened before. It was a Grayscale ETF and it was on an obscure cryptocurrency. And both the founder of that company and Grayscale came out same day that it was filed and said, no, this is not real. It's a fake. We didn't get that from Ripple. We didn't get that from BlackRock. It came from a secondary media source that said they spoke to BlackRock about it, which was Bloomberg. And then Eric, the gentleman that reported on that at the time, also was a moderator at Swell this year.
And there's always this interesting connection between BlackRock and Ripple in the form of Robbie Mitchnick, who wrote the original XRP valuation model or created the first XRP valuation model. So I don't think there's a coincidence there.
No, not at all. I'm waiting on BlackRock to throw their weight behind XRP and really file the ETF. I think that they could use the trust that's sitting in the background there that's been removed from the site. It's no longer on the site, but they could stand it up very quickly and then move if another S1 was approved to really funnel liquidity into XRP if there was a crisis of some kind.
And last year, when we released that XRP valuation paper about the fair market value models, there was a lot of criticism. And the main issue was with the developer community and kind of the TA crowd. They don't believe that XRP will be a store of value. They believe it has utility and you can just use it for a quick transaction and it doesn't need to be held. But what do you think BlackRock wants an ETF for? Like, they want to hold the asset as a store of value. They want to give people the perception that they're buying into it, but really they're using client funds to buy XRP for BlackRock. Like, BlackRock will own those assets.
Well, and you've seen that already happen with Bitcoin, right? Like, there's been a huge driver for Bitcoin this year because of the ETFs. I mean, it reached all-time high before the halving even happened, which is an anomaly. That's never happened in market cycle previous to this one. We've continued to see it go higher since then. I thought we would see some type of downturn around 75,000. That didn't happen. I was wrong on that, and it's continued even higher. We're at all-time high today of 95,000 for Bitcoin. So obviously there's demand for a store of value in opposition to the dollar and to hold your money outside of fiat currency. And gold, all-time high right now also. So to your point, I think that XRP makes a fantastic option for that.
It also begs the question of, are the prices of those assets going up? Or is the dollar value just continuing to go down a lot? I mean, that's the thing about Forex and all of these kind of price things, is they're all relative. And in our lifetime, everything has been priced relative to the dollar, which we were led to believe as kids was like a stable coin, a stable store of value. But that is obviously not the case. You just go to the grocery store and look how expensive things have been getting for the last 4 years.
Yeah, paradigm around saving your wealth in any type of fiat currency. Judy Sheldon came out this morning and is in support of Brad Garlinghouse and him speaking on Fox and Ripple. And, she's talked about going to a gold-backed currency and a cryptocurrency type of way, were her words.
That quote is in the theme song of our Escape Velocity.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So excited to see Judy, kind of championing Ripple. Feels like, things are close here. You got Charles Hoskinson also having conversations with Brad Garlinghouse and David Schwartz and Jed McCaleb over the last few days. Interesting timing for that also.
Very.
So Ripple's been a proponent of all ships rise. I don't think that they've ever said anything poorly. Like even they've even said that Ethereum is not a security, that they don't believe it's a security. I think it's a security personally, just because it's pure proof of stake. But they've said that it's not, that they don't think it is, and that they want clarity for all of crypto, not just XRP in particular. So I think they've taken the high road when a lot of people threw stones early on, and now they're coming back around and I don't want to say groveling, but trying to save face and get back in and make sure everything's kosher now that the lawsuit seems to be, it's not over yet, but on the back end of it for sure.
And one thing I've always found interesting for the last couple of years is the relationship between Stellar XLM and XRP. Stellar wasn't sued. There was no shade about this. Is XLM a security or not? But the prices, like, they seem to trend almost perfectly, right? Like when one goes up, the other one goes up, and vice versa. And the last like 2 weeks or week, the price of Stellar at XLM has gone from like between 7 and 9 cents to up to like 23, 24 cents. So that's an even bigger jump, I think, than we've seen with XRP. So what's your view on the relationship between XLM and XRP?
So in the stablecoin regulation that's been put forth here in the US for that bill, both XLM and XRP would meet the qualifications for a bridge currency underneath that. And so the only time we've seen a discrepancy in how those two moved together was when we got the trust filing for BlackRock last year for XRP. It moved very sharply to the upside, while XLM just stayed where it was. So that's the only thing that I think could really drive a lot of liquidity into XRP over XLM, because like you've said, they've been very tightly correlated. And I think that's for a reason. I think that both of them are likely to be used in some capacity settling transactions. I've always thought, and based on the conversations we've had with partners and other institutions we speak with, Hyperledger is more merchant or consumer facing, where the XRPL tends to be more back-end settlement for large financial institutions.
I've believed for quite some time now that the story about the falling out between Jed McCaleb and the Ripple team may have been fabricated. It just seems, it's like a trashy story about like girlfriend drama, that these guys who are creating, a multi-quadrillion-dollar financial system, they're going to get that derailed because of like a girlfriend squabble. It just seems strange to me. However, if they had gone to market with just one ledger, it could be considered a monopoly, right? Like you can't have one company like own everything. So what if you split it into two? It's like Coke and Pepsi. Let's give the illusion of separation, but really they're big. The technology is the same, right? Jed McCaleb was instrumental in both of them, but they act like they're separate. It's the king and the queen, right? You even have like a female running Stellar and Brad Garlinghouse running the other one. Just it creates this perfect storyline that like, oh no, one's for retail, one's for wholesale. They're separate, which is why I think they tend to correlate and trend together, because they're serving the same function, but for two sort of different markets.
Yeah, I would agree. You have antitrust laws here in the US. I think things would be substantially cheaper if we didn't have antitrust laws here in the US. But because you have to segment things out and you want competition, drives prices up, and then you also the people that I know that we work with family offices, they own basically the whole supply chain. So if that was under one conglomerate, you might have you'd have high margins, but there wouldn't be a 30% margin here when they mine it and then sell it to somebody that turns it into whatever it's going to be used for, and then they sell it to the manufacturer, wholesaler, and then retail, and you have all these markups in between where they're basically just selling it to themselves and marking it up each time before it gets to retail. Anyway, rabbit hole. I think that to your point, Jed McCaleb, it's been very interesting to follow him. You got Mt. Gox, you got Ripple, and then over here with Stellar.
Then Vast, like, that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
Yeah.
He's building a space station. Like everybody, builds a space station, right? Like that's no big deal.
Yeah. He definitely been instrumental in this, and I think that there's definitely a corollary there, probably more so. But he sold all his XRP, right? Like he had the taco stand wallet, and he's liquidated that. I think it was about a year before the lawsuit settled that he sold his last amount of XRP out of that wallet. He had programmatic sales that ran daily. made billions of dollars selling the XRP over that time
Interesting.
period.
His sales were not considered security sales. He wasn't in trouble for that.
Yeah, so he wasn't listed in the lawsuit with Chris or Brad, which again, maybe that was on purpose too. Who knows? But they could have easily pointed to him and said, "Hey, look, like he's literally selling onto the market every single day on the secondary market, and he's not listed here, but you're coming after us because we're still running the company." That doesn't make any sense, right?
I mean, if it's a security or not, does it matter? I mean, I guess they're saying that like his actions won't benefit the value because he doesn't work there anymore. But if XRP is a security, then who does it matter who sells it?
Right. Which, I mean, we know we have a ruling that XRP is not a security. And now this will be interesting, especially for the business that we're in. We've got Trump coming out and saying that potentially any US-based cryptocurrency company, there will be no capital gains if you were to sell those.
Great.
Which is huge for Hedera. It's huge for XLM, XRP.
Makes question about Ethereum though. Like Ethereum the ICO was launched outside the US. If the majority of holders are non-US, majority of holders are non-US entities, what does that mean for Ethereum?
Right. Yeah, there may be significant capital gains if we were to find out that Bitcoin was international and not here domestic to the US as well. That could be problematic. Still don't know who Satoshi is. There was something the other day though that Michael Saylor was on a stage and there was another gentleman that said he met Satoshi back in 1993.
Scottie Pippen, the basketball player.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he just kind of looked at him like, "Don't you say, hey, MicroStrategy is wow. Performance there is crazy."
Right. I'm not a big fan of Michael Saylor for many reasons. One is you can't, in my opinion, be such a staunch, like non-negotiable supporter of Bitcoin without addressing the Satoshi issue. Because the US government has a history of issuing sanctions when they think someone in charge of something is like a terrorist or not on their most favored list or whatever. So to make that a non-issue, I think is negligent. I mean, he very strongly advises people to like go take out a loan and buy Bitcoin, where ethically should he be doing that if he doesn't know the details? So he's got to know.
Yeah, he looked at Scotty like he knew who Satoshi was.
And are there 4 Satoshis or just one?
He was also recently on Patrick Bet-David's podcast.
Okay.
And he's very eloquent. Like Saylor is not dumb. He's very intelligent. Which is that's why it's hard for me to stomach like that he's so maxi the way that he is toward Bitcoin.
I mean, all the attorneys behind ETHgate are also intelligent men.
Yeah, follow the money. So we'll see. He was also the largest loser in the .com. Like if you look at the MicroStrategy chart, you can see in 2000, like it went way up and then collapsed on itself and it was flat for a long time, and now it's way up again. History tends to rhyme or repeat. I don't know that'll be.
Well, does he answer to somebody who bailed him out of that problem?
Also quite possible. If Scotty met Satoshi back in 93, maybe Saylor did too. And they said, "Hey, come on board and we're gonna do this thing and we're gonna, get it out there and make it look like a grassroots movement," when in reality, maybe there's some larger governments and things behind Bitcoin. I think we'll find out. I think at some point the news around that will break.
I agree. I think we have to know at some point. And Dan Pena has also publicly said that when we find out who it is, we're going to be shocked.
Straight to zero. That's what he says.
Straight to zero, which is fascinating. Like, who could it be that's that like diabolical that it goes to zero?
We still don't have the list for Epstein and everything that went on there. It's a taboo topic and like not so good. I think under Trump and the administration that's now here, there's actually a podcast that Elon was on where he was asked, or it was stated that those names would come out after Trump got into office here. So if it became correlated with the trafficking and that side of things, I think very quickly it would be unwound. And now you have options that were launched on Bitcoin as of yesterday. Grayscales goes live today. I thought, and this is what we're doing with our fund and RIA, looking at taking short positions to be able to hedge against volatility or downside risk in Bitcoin to mitigate losses. That's not what these people are doing with the options. They're doubling down and taking leverage longs for the investment banks and other pension funds. And everybody's like, oh, foregone conclusion, 100,000 for sure.
Well, if they're gonna, so I also have the belief that the US debt problem doesn't have a whole lot of solutions other than hyperinflating the dollar to make what appears to be a lot of debt magically one day, not very much. So you got to move that, the people who know that's coming, you got to move your money out of treasuries into something. It's not that easy to go buy a whole ton of real estate, not a ton of gold. Maybe they are moving, they've been stockpiling gold for a long time. So why not go park it in Bitcoin for a little while?
Let things shake out. And yeah, I mean, it's possible. I think that liquidity is going to end up in XRP. To your point earlier, and you didn't say this, but I think it'll end up being a tier 1 asset designated by the BIS, similar to treasuries or gold. And I don't know that it'll be able to provide backing. One of the things stipulated in the bill, the stablecoin bill here in the US, was that no digital asset could provide backing, or cryptocurrency is what I think the term they used.
Okay.
So, which Tether has a problem, right? So they've got 3 to 5% of their balance sheet is Bitcoin. And now they have litigation with Celsius that's actually locked up about half of that. It's an escrow, and they couldn't dump it if they wanted to in order to get compliant.
And there's ties that go way back between Tether and the Epstein crowd.
That's another cause for concern for me. You know, I know people are like, oh, the Tether FUD, it's been around for forever. It definitely has. Speculation that, you know, Tether maybe has been rolled into the U.S. government. I think you had talked about that previous on something else. You'd mentioned that. I would concur with that.
Because think about it, the Fed has a monopoly on printing dollars, right? You are only allowed to issue new dollars if the Fed gives you permission to do so. And the commercial banks, when they issue loans, there was no reserve requirements for the last like 5 years. So, you know, Citibank and JP Morgan, when they issue a mortgage, that money was created out of nothing. But they're members of the Fed, so they're allowed to do that. The Eurodollar market, which Tom Luongo has talked about a long time, they were creating dollars outside the US without permission of the Fed. Some argue that the interest rate hikes the last couple of years were really to collapse the Eurodollar market because they want to be the only ones created. Tether creates dollars out of Bitcoin. And that's like, the Fed generally would shut that type of thing down, and they have the legislative ability to make it illegal or whatever.
It served a purpose, though. So Tether is now the 6th or 5th largest holder of U.S. Treasuries. We've had a lot of foreign debt holders dump U.S. Treasuries to de-risk from the dollar over the past 5 years here. And it seems as though Tether has been kind of like the purchaser. They said, come on, you know, sell them to us. We'll take them. We'll back our Tether with it, sell off the Bitcoin, you know, do the shuffle that we need to do to like try to get compliant. But I think that served a purpose for the Fed and the U.S. Treasury market, because if we did have a huge dumping of international debt onto the market with nobody and no demand to soak that up, that's a problem for the stability of the U.S. dollar. And I think we could still see that with the unwinding of the reverse carry trade in Japan. If they raise interest rates from here, which it looks like they're going to have to, that starts to exacerbate that again, like we saw in early August.
And the Tether logo is kind of funny. It looks like a little bomb exploding, right? So, and CZ's famous quote about, you know, when all the ships sink, anything that's untethered will float back. Kind of the implication was that Tether, if the US Treasury market collapsed, Tether's in trouble, right? They hold so much.
Well, so is Buffett. Buffett has what, 385 billion dollars. He owns more treasuries than the U.S. government right now. But, again, stablecoin regs, if you wanted to issue a stablecoin or be a liquidity provider, you need that backing. And so I think if we did see a destabilization of the U.S. Treasury market, they would be very quick to move that regulation in. And then you would see Amazon, you would see Google, you would see anybody that wants to issue a stablecoin step in and soak those treasuries up in order to support, the U.S. dollar.
And we've seen this play before where some like terrible thing happens, like 9/11. And on the other side of that black swan event, governments step in with regulation to look like a savior. The Patriot Act, which is a massive document, was created very quickly post 9/11, almost like, how did they do it so fast? Well, maybe they already had it ready. So we don't have regulations in the US. I mean, stablecoin thing is one issue, but that's not really the comprehensive regulations that we need. So what if they're just kind of waiting for some dramatic collapse of the markets and they're like, oh no, big problem. Government can step in and be the savior. We got this, we've been working on this document. We just so happen to have it almost ready. What a coincidence. And that could then reclassify XRP, as you just said, in the name of national security or like survival of the world's financial system. And Jimmy and I have long believed that they were going to collapse fiat currencies. All these central banks have been stockpiling gold. They would just issue new sovereign currencies that are gold backed, because once fiat collapses, nobody's going to trust fiat. So we'll have to return to gold temporarily because it's been money since the beginning of time. People trust gold, and it like across countries, everybody kind of agrees, since biblical times that gold is money. And Judy Shelton, she's entered back into the conversation pretty loudly lately, and she's a big gold bug and believer in gold-backed currencies. So I feel like we're seeing all of these kind of storylines come together to pave the way for a new financial system, assets backed by gold. XRP is the bridge currency, and all these kind of shady criminal organizations, Tether, Ethereum, there's some kind of executive order around either trafficking or election interference or some kind of shadiness will remove those companies from the playing board.
Yeah, I think so. I just want to take it back to the interesting timing of the launch of this movie.
Yes.
I know that Chris and Maya were planning on launching it in September, and they pivoted and did some things, and so now it's just really interesting timing. We've seen a little price rise as they've gone through the premieres, and now seems like the chart, I'm not a TA guy, but seems like the chart set up for a big move higher within the next week here. So,
and then Ripple's stablecoin enters the story at this time. So it's all this sort of perfect trains entering Grand Central Station all on schedule.
Yeah. Well, and you've got the amendments that they passed for digital identity that's native to the network now. You've got oracles that are native to the network now. A lot of things that are going to be required for institutions to be able to participate and use the technology in a way that allows them to transact and, foster it.
And Trump neutralizing the SEC as an anti-crypto entity, like it's perfect timing for a lot of these things to kind of usher in the conditions for this new financial system.
Absolutely. So, we've talked a few different times about, what Val Hill's working on, and I'm sure you share this with your audience all the time, but I would be interested, what type of products, and I know that y'all want to foster the actual use of this technology in different applications. Is it still primarily on like the data storage side, or like, what are y'all looking at? Are you looking at leveraging XRP and that protocol in any manner?
So our focus right now is really on the tokenization of assets and kind of helping companies and countries kind of migrate their assets to the blockchain. As we know, Larry Fink went on his little tour months ago, kind of preparing people for that. Now, because of Jimmy's expertise as an M&A lawyer, it also makes sense for kind of M&A transactions to kind of fit into that. We also strongly believe that we're watching the death of the old corrupt financial system where a lot of shady things went on and nobody talked about it. This is why the movie is so pivotal. These two large law firms like Simpson Thacher, even Perkins Coie in the third one, you have these very smart, very connected law firms doing shady things, and they operate above the law because all their conversations with their clients are privileged, right? And so there has to be this massive cleaning house of these corrupt groups who were not making decisions in the best interests of citizens. And so if you get rid of all those people and you no longer have a world where business pursues profit at all costs, meaning at the expense of anyone and everyone who gets in the way, like how do you run a company so it's successful but doesn't harm people? While that sounds like such an obvious logical thing, of course you should want to do that. That's not how it's been working. So we also believe that we are going to be architects of this new financial system in the fact that we're going to help businesses figure out how to operate ethically, but still successfully. Like you can do that. And namely too, like I just put this out like a week or two ago, countries can also operate as corporations because they're all set up that way and not tax people as a way to keep them in the caste system, but to use the assets that a nation owns to generate cash flow to cover the expenses. Like we could truly we're going to enter this era where countries and republics serve the interests of their people and free us from this tax system. You know, Trump has already said he's going to get rid of income tax. This capital gains thing's going away. Imagine if we live in this world where there really aren't taxes because the assets of the republic make money and kind of treat us as like people who get royalties.
Well, and that already exists in the Middle East, right? So there's stipends that are paid to their citizens that are born there from the government because of the oil that they sell. And you get a nice, little payday every single
Royalty
month.
check. Like, why shouldn't you?
Yeah. I think that, let's say XRP does get adopted in the manner that we're hoping, with the AMMs and the liquidity pools and those things, if governments and financial institutions and large bodies are able to leverage that asset and earn income off of it in that manner by providing liquidity in those ecosystems through the really interesting way that David Schwartz put those together. The liquidity providers went out over even anybody that arbitrages the market. All that gets paid back to them. So, if there are governments that have billions of XRP on their balance sheet, and that is how they, fix the debt, if we got to start using the asset and it appreciated against the liabilities to offset that, and then you could move all the debt on chain, and continue to push price up over time. I'm with you. I think that there's a lot of freeing that could happen as long as we have the right people in power. It's been interesting to see, Xi Jinping and Putin and North Korea and a lot of these other countries. As soon as Trump was, elected again, they were like, "We're good. Glad to see that happened. We'll play nice."
Makes you wonder the stuff that we have heard and seen in the media for years about China, about Putin, about even North Korea being sort of our enemies. Like, were they really our enemies, or were they just enemies of kind of the deep state who controlled the media?
Well, it makes sense, if we were hurting them with the dollar, which we've had that power, right? It's been a privilege and a power that the U.S. has had over the last since 1971 when Nixon removed us from the gold standard, and we've wielded that in a way that really hasn't been favorable for other countries.
I want to respectfully clarify something.
Yeah.
We are not the Federal Reserve. Like,
Wow.
I had no say in any of those policies. Like, I'm not a warmonger by any means. I didn't benefit, via the Cantillon effect from being close to the money printer. So when people refer collectively to the dollar system as us as Americans, I'll be like, I don't know if that's really true. The Federal Reserve is a private corporation that issues the money, that funds the military industrial complex, that does a lot of this war business. I'm hopeful and I'm confident we're going to see a return to the Republic, that the Treasury will issue the money and we will not have this same agenda that the Federal Reserve and whoever they reported into, potentially the City of London, creates these wars and these conflicts, because war and illness are very good for business.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the justification for the income tax was that we were at war, and we have been ever since they rolled that out. And when it was brought out, it was 1% of people that paid income tax, and now it's everyone.
I mean, the whole American Revolution was fought over like not wanting to pay taxes to the crown, and we're back in a situation where we're still paying taxes, ironically, to the crown.
Yeah. Well, if good people don't stand up and fight things, then you have bad people that will, right? So, we had the Titanic, which has also been something that's been pointed to, like you
Right.
said earlier.
Yeah.
Jacob Astor and many other people that opposed the Federal Reserve were on that boat when it sank, and J.P. Morgan, who owned it, was just bowed out at the last second somehow and didn't get on. Coincidence? Maybe, probably not.
That's a crazy rabbit hole too. Whether it was even the Titanic or the Olympic that sunk, like we're not really
Right?
even
Yeah.
sure.
Insurance. Anyway,
I
check
do want
that.
to pivot. Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll pivot to something a little more positive. So one thing I've been asked about recently, and I know this is an area of expertise of yours, is a lot of patient XRP holders and maybe other assets like XLM who are aware that once these things like the virtuous cycle kick in, they're going to have tremendous amounts of wealth that can be a little bit scary. Like, what do I do? I'm not going to hold like $1 billion on a Ledger Nano wallet.
Yeah.
So is it time for people to learn about trust? Like, how do you is that something regular people can set up? Is that the solution to this type of situation, in your opinion?
It just depends. So I put a video out like literally a couple days ago around the first things that you should do and kind of the 10-step process on what it looks like when you come into a lot of money. And the first thing is to create a family constitution or a family compass. So what is your North Star, your mission statement, core values, principles, the things that you want to foster within your family and how you want to use that wealth, right?
Okay.
And then depending on what that looks like, you're kind of fall into three categories, and you might be across some of them. So you have lifestyle, like a lot of people may not have beneficiaries, they may not have philanthropic interest, and they may also not realize how much money they're going to come into. And
Okay.
so they're like, okay, I just want to maximize my lifestyle, enjoy my life, retire, do the things that I wanted to do, travel, all that.
Okay.
Next bucket is more of a generational wealth type situation. Maybe you want to, start businesses or acquire businesses or grow your business. You want to set things up for generations to come and make sure that there's contingencies in there so that they don't mess it up. That's a lot of what we do with the governance around the family office. And then lastly, like I mentioned, philanthropic interest. There's a lot of people that are just really genuine good people that have something on their heart that they want to give back to and help. And so I think nonprofits will be very prevalent among people that make a lot of money in digital assets. Donate things in kind. There's some stipulations about how much, but again, we help people with all across the board. And again, some people are all three, some people are two, one, just depends. And so in each one of those circumstances, a trust may or may not be appropriate. Foundation may or may not be appropriate.
Okay.
But qualified custody, I would say, is the one commonality across all of those. To your point, holding $1 billion on a ledger that's not insured in your drawer, that you could lose the keys to, and then you're
Right.
like, how many people have lost millions of dollars in Bitcoin that they'll never get back because they lost the keys, they can't get into the wallet, right?
Right.
So we work with our clients and hold their assets at Anchorage. The keys are never seen by anyone. They're programmatic on the blockchain. They're sharded, held across hardware security modules in level 4 facilities, quantum proof. And so, then you can add beneficiaries and secondary signers. Your wife or spouse can get to it if something, God forbid, happens to you. I don't know how many people we've had a conversation with where their spouse is just, I don't want to know about that. You handle it, and then something happens and now they can't get to it, and that's what you set it up for. You wanted to help your family, right? So anyway, I've spent the
So,
last 2.5 years trying to get all this figured out for people to make sure that they would be situated on the other side of price appreciation, just like you're talking about.
so just related to your last point, when I bring up custody with people who've been in crypto a long time, it like triggers this like not your keys, not your crypto sort of
Yeah.
paranoia. Like, how do you walk people through that transition that they are kind of relinquishing some control, but it's actually a smarter thing to do?
Well, we can't move assets without their signature. So they are a signer on the wallet. We are just a countersigner. So, and you might go, okay, well, I want me and my spouse to be a signer. Fantastic. We can do that as well. You, your trustee, your spouse, anybody that you want to be a signer can be on the account. And you can make it threshold. So let's say, if it's $1 million or less, like those people can sign for it. You can sign for it. We sign for it. And it's good. If it's 10 million, it's me and my wife. If it's 50 million, it's me, my wife, and another family member, right? So you can create governance around who signs what when. It's insured, so that's the other thing. Crime insurance are on these accounts. It's Lloyd's of London Marsh is the broker that we work with over there at Anchorage, and we can do species insurance on that. So let's say you go to $1 billion and the 100 million that we have isn't enough for you. If you want extra insurance on it, pay for that, right? I think a lot of people are familiar with this stuff when it comes to their traditional portfolio and management. People are excited about DeFi and being able to put their assets in a protocol and borrow against it. But you're also subject to liquidation if there's a downturn in the market, right? Like that protocol doesn't care about you. There's no personal relationship. They're not going to cut you some slack and wait. They're just going to liquidate your assets. Whereas the tri-party agreements that we have, you have first right of refusal, so you can buy the assets back if there is a margin call. You get a good period of time to be able to re-up if there's something that's an issue. It's a lot more human experience. You have somebody that you can call. And depending on your age and your preferences, that may mean something to you. Gen Z, I think is becoming much more native to the internet and maybe has a little bit less want for that. But I can tell you the majority of our clients over 40 years old really value a personal relationship and somebody that they can have a conversation with and look in the eye and know that stuff's good, right? So
one thing that was a shock to me when I first learned this in the last couple of years was that when I put my money, like my paycheck or my money in a commercial bank, I'm sort of surrendering the property rights of that money. So if I put my assets in Anchorage, am I surrendering property rights to the asset? Okay.
No, so they're bankruptcy remote, completely separate, siloed accounts, never commingled. It's not like an exchange. So if you were to move your XRP, Bitcoin, whatever it was, onto an exchange, it's very similar to a bank. They owe that back to you. And we've seen the problems that exist around FTX and Voyager and Celsius and a lot of these that have gone down. The way that they've separated this out, Anchorage custody is completely separate from Anchorage, the exchange. And so they have no rights to these assets. They couldn't move them even if they wanted to because you're a signer on the account, right? People also have concerns about the U.S. government. What if the U.S. government, wants to come in and take it? Nope. You still have to sign. If you don't sign, assets can't move. So good questions though, because those we get frequent from people, especially.
Right. I mean, I think that the Mt. Gox thing specifically, people who were in that back then really scared them. It's almost like people in the Depression who like kept money under their mattress after the bank collapsed back in like 1929. Creates this like trauma. And I think people who went through some of those bankruptcies, Celsius and Voyager too, like
they're not trusting anybody.
I don't want to ever be in that position again. So these third-party custodians, I think, trigger that fear legitimately, but they're different.
Yeah, it is. And again, we have the documentation to show that it's bankruptcy remote and that they have no access or rights to your assets. Because that's a big, again, I'm like everybody else. I'm an XRP holder. I have a large amount and I want to make sure that it's taken care of. And so I have all these same questions. And so we've tried to build something and curate it to where, and to your point earlier, most corporations are not in your interest. They want profit. Everybody that's involved with our company is going to make a lot of money alongside everybody else. We're not here to take money from other people. Obviously, we want to be compensated for the services that we're providing, but I always want to walk away from a transaction and I want the other person to walk away from a transaction feeling like almost like they got one over on me. Like whatever value and money that they exchanged for whatever it was, they were like, wow, I would have paid more for that,
We like to call that the pathway where everybody wins. It's not a zero-sum game. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we're going to move to a world that's like that. I think a lot of people that are in the XRP community, you and Jimmy, a lot of the people that are prominent have a very, I don't want to say esoteric, but like-minded agenda when it comes to that. I think that we'll be able to kind of curate things when the wealth comes to be a little bit more, hopefully a lot more favorable for the average person.
I've been wanting to ask you something for a while. So back at the first XRP conference, you, me, Max, and Jimmy kind of had a conversation in a bar one night around sort of CBDCs and universal basic income. And kind of at the time, we were pretty confident that that would never come to be, but you and Max kind of had a different point of view on that. So has that changed or updated? Like, what do you see happening in terms of UBI or CBDCs?
Yeah, I think that that's still going to be I don't know that it'll be here in the U.S. They may supplement that. So the same way that they've used BlackRock as kind of like a patsy to be able to buy and manipulate the stock market, I think that there may be something that's secondary in that capacity, that issues or mint stable coins that provides people with some type of income if they were to hold it, right? I don't think it would be a direct like China, right? Like they have totalitarian control, they have a CBDC, they're able to turn on and off accounts. I don't think that that'll ever be a thing here. I think a lot of the concerns that people have around the CBDC are warranted, and I want them to express those fears so that they don't happen. But I do think that there's a lot of applications where it could be beneficial for people, especially in government assistance. Now that we have had the amount of, I don't want to say hyperinflation, but inflation that we have, to your point earlier, like groceries are expensive. You just saw the earnings report for Target fall off a cliff, and the stock dropped 13% this morning because they missed the mark. And people aren't buying extras; they're just not, and they're not willing to pay a premium on their groceries to go shop at Target either. They're going to Walmart or other locations because their dollar just doesn't go as far. And so I don't know in the revaluation that our currency is going to come up as much as a lot of people would like. I think over time we could see some depreciation happen, and the advent of a lot of these technologies will make things reduce costs over time. But in the short term here, I think bridging the gap with some type of UBI would be very beneficial for the majority of the population and would probably be welcomed, but does come with those other risks that you mentioned. So
And I think UBI had a negative connotation because people see it as like welfare type thing. But if UBI was more what you mentioned, some Middle Eastern countries have, where the assets that the republic owns that generate cash flow are simply like profit sharing with the citizens, UBI could be royalties, which the wealthy in the world have lived off royalties for generations. So I don't know if UBI has to be a bad thing, as some people like to label it as.
yeah, I think it always has been, aside from the Middle Eastern countries, funded through taxation, right? You're taking from this group and giving to this group and appropriating, choosing winners. And in a world like you just mentioned, if the assets themselves there's an abundance and you could appropriate that across the citizens, I think people, that's a much better place to be. So, and I think that's likely where we're headed. Japan, they're in their pilot phase for their CBDC. I think that they'll probably be the first to launch. You got the digital pound is likely on the horizon here in the very short term. Stablecoin regs here in the U.S. I think that that'll be the first thing that happens, and also drive adoption for specific networks when it does. And then maybe in 2025, a little bit later on, we might get regulations for the rest of digital assets. I think there's going to be a few networks that benefit massively here in the short term. A lot of the ones that have ETFs positioned to roll liquidity into them.
I think we're also going to see some other big changes, like the state of Texas, where you live, has said that they're going to issue their own currency, with gold back, and they're going to issue their new stock exchange. So do you see Texas as playing a different role in the global financial system moving forward?
I think Dallas is going to be the the financial.
Isn't that where you live, Dallas? Okay.
Yeah, I think it'll be the financial hub for the U.S. I think it'll move away from New York. Is there corruption there? There seems to be. You got BlackRock and Citadel funding the Texas Stock Exchange. We're going to actually try to. I don't know if we'll be able to get a space in the building that they're in, but we're going to try to do that for our firm. But yeah, I'm hopeful for that, and I'm excited. Texas has a lot of. We're really the only state that has any right to separate from the union. Do we do that? I don't think so. I think now that Trump is in, that's a lot less likely. I don't think we would have done it anyway, but it's nice to say that we have the right to do it. Have our own electric grid. We have half the U.S. military here. We have access to the Gulf of Mexico. Texas could be very self-sufficient, and I think that's why. Well, there's a lot of reasons why, but I think a lot of people have relocated here over the last 4 or 5 years since COVID too. We've seen a big boom in our population and GDP. So,
yes, Texas has been a hot state, not just weather-wise, but like popularity wise. Elon Musk has also kind of been a public face of that transition, as well as California seems to collapse in terms of being the innovation center that it used to be.
Yeah, Austin is a big tech hub now. Some of the stuff that we're doing with private investment, we've seen little hubs pop up all across the U.S., Texas included, where people are trying to foster tech companies to come there. And you've seen that in the Middle East also. They've paid out stipends. They give you an office space. They fund like half of the payroll for people that you employ from Dubai or some of those other nation states there in the UAE. Government subsidies on that stuff helps. So
It almost makes you wonder, like when you look back on things in hindsight and you can look at the way events happened, knowing the end result, makes me wonder if both New York and California, like if they were intentionally trying to clear out all the shadiness there, move it elsewhere so that those two states could be rebuilt kind of in a new way, because both of them, I mean, the whole Hollywood thing is gross and horrible. The Wall Street thing, equally shady. If you kind of just cleared it out, like almost like a flood, right? And just washed out all the dirtiness, you'd have this empty place now that you could rebuild more healthy, constructive systems in.
yeah, I think that's part of the narrative and potentially what's been done. Smart cities, I think, will become, a lot more prevalent over the next decade here. I was talking to a gentleman last night about IoT and what that looks like. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things progress. You need cycles, right? You have to go through periods of time where you're building and then things get torn down and rebuilt. Japan's been able to do that really well over the last since World War II. So yeah, I don't think we need to put off any atomic bombs, but
So I saw some pictures you had of your recent Mastermind event. So if people are interested in kind of being a part of your world, like what are the different kind of options they have? Jojo was just visiting me in Atlanta a couple of days ago, so I heard a little bit about it. So why don't you share with us what the deal is?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. So a lot of different things, right? I like to do things like this content. People could listen to this and try to figure things out on their own. I like to provide services where it's kind of a hold your hand and help you, and then a done for you, and everything that we do. So the Mastermind's kind of like a hold your hand deal, and it's got community. There's a ton of people there that have aligned interest. Almost 900 members in there now, which is crazy to me.
Wow.
Never would have thought.
Okay.
But we
Is that what the event was you had recently for that group?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so anybody in the Mastermind can attend the meetings. We do have some exclusive meetings for the higher levels that we do once a quarter, but anybody that's in social or Carbon One, any of the groups can attend the Mastermind meetups. We've had one almost every single quarter for 2 years. Free
And are
drinks.
they usually in Dallas? Are they all over the place or what?
Yeah, we've done a couple different locations. I would say 3/4 of them have been here in Dallas, and then a few others just sporadically across the U.S. Depending on where we were, what events we were at, we would co-host one there. Just because sometimes it's hard for people to travel all the way to Texas. But we've had people from Italy, Norway, Australia, Canada, like all over the world fly in for them. And then obviously a large portion of the Mastermind's domestic here in the U.S. as well. So, yeah, I can't, never would have thought that we would be able to build the culture and just, like I said, good, genuine people that want a safe space to talk about this stuff, because a lot of people are ostracized in their, friend circle at home or wherever they are. It's nice to have a genuine conversation with somebody in person that gets it. And we have Discord, and we provide a lot of financial education there. We run private deals in the community. A lot of Ripple equity over the last couple of years that we've been able to acquire for people there through 506B Reg D funds. And yeah, just we have health insurance also. We put that together for the group. So we piggyback on another association. I've been a part of other masterminds, and I've really tried to curate this to make it as valuable as I possibly could for people, especially at the price point. On the other side of price appreciation, we are going to lock it down for 30 days and raise prices 10x. just because I'm very conscious of the wealth that's going to be generated for these people. And we want to make sure that we're vetting people very heavily on the other side of that. We don't want sharks or people with malintent to come into the group. So we got that. And then, you know, digital family office, help people be proactive, set up an LLC or a trust, structure their estate correctly to mitigate taxes on the other side of appreciation, do insurance, concierge service, private security, anything that you could think of there. And then we have Digital Wealth Partners, which is the wealth management arm of that does the institutional custody and financial advice.
Got your hands in a lot of cookie jars, Jake.
I didn't even talk about Syndicate Lee or the other stuff. Yeah, we have a lot going on. We've got I think we have about 25 people that work here across the different companies. So roller coaster. Like I said, super proud, super blessed and grateful to have all the people that work with us, see the long-term vision of it and be willing to help out and grow with us. So
amazing. It was great to catch up with you. I know that a lot has changed since we last spoke, and it's all sort of feels like the stuff we talked about ages ago is now finally materializing in the 3D, which is pretty cool. And I think it's only going to go up from here.
I would agree. Thanks again for having me back, and you know, excited for the future.
Sure. I'll put the links to some of the stuff you mentioned, like that video you made recently about the 3 different groups. I'll put that in the comments in case anybody wants to check that out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Molly.
All right. Great to see you, Jake.
You too. We'll see you.